All right, so a master's degree in the USA, huh? Big decision.
It is the big one.
So many programs out there, so many universities, and then that whole application process.
Yeah, it can feel pretty overwhelming.
But that's why we're here today. We're doing a deep dive into all things masters in the U.S., looking at articles, guides, even some real student success stories.
I think what's really fascinating is that even though the costs are going up, a U.S. master's degree is still so sought after.
Mm.
Did you know there was a survey recently that showed that something like 92% of global employers actually prefer candidates with the U.S. master's over any other international degree?
92%. That's a pretty strong argument for going to the U.S., I guess.
It says a lot about the value people put on a U.S. education.
Yeah, it really does. But beyond just like employer preference, what makes a master's from the U.S. so unique? We're talking Harvard, MIT, Stanford, but I bet there are so many specialized programs that most people haven't even heard of. What makes them stand out from the rest?
Well, it's a bunch of things, really. You've got the name recognition, of course, but also U.S. universities tend to be much more research-focused. They've got state-of-the-art labs. They're collaborating with people at the top of their industries, and that kind of trickles down to the student experience.
So it's not just sitting in lectures all day.
No, not at all. Hands-on learning is a really big part of it. You're doing internships at companies that are actually working in your field. You're collaborating with professors on cutting-edge research. It's really about building practical skills on top of the theory.
That makes sense. And I've also heard that the U.S. is really good for STEM fields in particular because of the strong job market and the fact that you can even stay there and work after you graduate.
Right, that's the post-study work visa. It's really attractive, especially for people graduating with STEM degrees. You can imagine you finish your master's and then you have the opportunity to work in Silicon Valley or in some amazing research lab. It's a real pathway to a global career right there in the U.S.
So we're painting a pretty attractive picture here. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty. If someone's listening and thinking, this sounds amazing, but how do I know if I'm even eligible for a U.S. master's? And what programs are hot right now?
Those are the key questions.
Right.
Typically, you're going to need a bachelor's degree, that's your undergrad degree, with a decent GPA, at least a 3.0 out of 4.0. But of course, the higher the better, especially for the top schools. Then you've got to prove you can speak English, so there are tests like the IELTS or the TOEFL.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The standardized tests, can't get away from those.
Oh.
What about the GRE or GMAT? I always get those mixed up.
Right, so those are extra exams. The GRE stands for Graduate Record Examination, and the GMAT is the Graduate Management Admission Test.
Okay.
Some programs need these, especially in business or engineering. They're testing your analytical skills, making sure you can handle the academic side of things. But it really depends on the program, so you really have to do your research.
Gotcha. Eligibility is one thing, but actually getting accepted, especially into one of the big-name universities, that's a whole other challenge. I imagine it's pretty competitive.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking thousands of applications for a handful of places. But let's look at a specific example. Say data analytics. That's a field that's just exploding right now. People are graduating and becoming data scientists, making an average of $98,000 starting salary. Pretty attractive, right?
Wow, $98,000.
Yeah.
Okay, data analytics is moving right up my list.
Yeah.
How do you stand out from the crowd, though? What are these admissions committees actually looking for?
Well, there are a couple of experts who've written about this, Dr. Philip G. Attach and Ajika Bhandari. They say it's not just about your grades anymore. You have to show your own story, what you're passionate about, and how the program fits into your long-term goals. They call it the holistic application.
So there's more to it than just checking off boxes.
A lot more. They're building a class. They're not just filling seats. They want a variety of perspectives and experiences. That's where your statement of purpose, or SOP, really comes in. That's the personal essay you have to write.
Yeah.
That's where you really sell yourself. Right?
Exactly. It's your chance to go beyond just the numbers and tell them who you are, what you're passionate about, and what makes you different. And of course, don't forget about the letters of recommendation, or LAWRs. Having someone who knows you vouch for your skills can make a big difference.
It sounds like a lot of work. But hold on, before we even get to applications, let's talk about the elephant in the room. The cost of studying in the U.S. I've heard some scary stories about tuition fees.
Oh, yeah. And those stories are usually true. It can be anywhere from $20,000 to $70,000 per year just for tuition.
Wow. And then on top of that, you have living expenses like rent, food, textbooks.
Right. You're
You
probably
know.
looking at another $10,000 to $20,000 on top of that.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Is it even worth it? Are there enough scholarships and financial aid out there to actually make a dent in that number?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's where things get a bit complicated. There are scholarships out there like the Fulbright scholarships or the AEW International Fellowships, and Some universities offer their own grants, but it's super competitive.
And they very rarely cover all the costs.
So what's the strategy? How do you even begin to tackle this mountain of expenses?
You have to attack it from different angles. First, you have to start early. The sooner you start researching and applying for scholarships, the better your chances are. Second, you need to look for scholarships that are specific to your field. There are a ton of very specific scholarships out there that most people don't even know exist. And lastly, get creative with your funding. Look into things like crowdfunding part-time work.
Wait, can international students even work while they're studying?
Yeah, usually you can work part-time up to 20 hours per week on campus. It's not going to cover everything, but it can definitely help, and it gives you some good work experience in the U.S.
Okay, so we've talked about the benefits of doing a U.S. master's and the eligibility, different program options. We've even touched on the financial side, which is honestly a little intimidating.
Yeah.
But what about the actual application process itself? Where do you even begin?
And that is where we'll pick up in part 2. We'll go through the whole application process step by step and give you some insider tips on making your application stand out.
Sounds good. And we'll be right back after a quick break.
Actually, we don't do breaks in our deep dives. We just keep the information coming.
Oh, right. Well, then on to part 2. All right. So we've got a good foundation now. We know why a U.S. master's is so valuable and what it takes to be eligible. But now let's get into the application process.
Yeah, it can seem pretty confusing.
Like a maze almost.
Right. But actually, it's more like a recipe.
Okay.
You need the right ingredients, the right steps, and a little bit of your own magic to make it work.
I like that analogy. So what are those key ingredients we need to start with?
First up, you've got your academic transcripts. Those are essential. And of course, your standardized test scores like your IELTS, TOEFL, GMAT scores, depending on the program, and a good resume that highlights all your experience.
Right, but those are just the basics. I feel like there's got to be something more to really make an application stand out. What's the secret sauce?
The secret sauce is definitely your statement of purpose, your SOP. This is your chance to tell your story, to connect the dots between what you've done and what you want to do. Why this program? Why now? What makes you the perfect candidate?
So it's not just a laundry list of achievements or a generic, I want to study in the U.S. kind of essay.
Nope, not at all. Think of it more like a conversation with the admissions committee. You're showing them your personality, your passion, what drives you, and you're showing them how you'll contribute to their program and ultimately to your field.
So it's like your personal elevator pitch. Okay, what about those letters of recommendation, the LORs? How much do those actually matter?
They're super important, especially if they come from people who can really speak to your abilities. Think professors, supervisors, mentors, people who know your work ethic, your problem-solving skills, your leadership qualities.
So it's about choosing the right people, someone who can say more than just, this student got good grades.
Exactly. You want someone who can give specific examples of what you're good at and how you've grown over time. They're basically saying, hey, this person's got what it takes to succeed in a tough master's program.
Okay, so we've got our ingredients prepped, transcripts, test scores, resume, SOP, LORs. Now, what about the actual process itself? Is there like a universal system, or does each university do things differently?
Well, there are some general similarities, but each university has its own online application portal, its own deadlines and specific requirements.
Oh, so it really is like baking.
It is. You have the basic recipe, but you might have to make some adjustments.
Right, so research is key, even at this stage.
Oh, absolutely. You need to start by making a list of universities and programs that fit with your academic goals and what you want to do with your career. Then you got to dive into their websites, look at the program details, and figure out what their specific application process is.
And don't forget about those deadlines.
Oh, yeah. Missing a deadline could mean missing your chance completely.
Yeah, so mark those dates on your calendar and work backwards. Create a timeline that gives you enough time to prepare each part of your application.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Speaking of marathons, this whole process can feel pretty overwhelming. Any advice for someone who's feeling lost in the application maze?
Well, just take it one step at a time. Don't try to do everything at once. And remember, there are resources out there to help you. Many universities offer online resources or webinars specifically for international students.
And there are organizations like LetzStudy that provide personalized guidance throughout the whole process, right?
Yeah, exactly. They can help you with everything from choosing the right program to writing your SOP to getting ready for your visa interview. Think of them like your personal guide through the application jungle.
Okay, that's reassuring. It's like having a coach in your corner.
Exactly. And don't forget, you're not alone in this. Thousands of students from all over the world apply to U.S. master's programs every year. You're part of a community.
That's a good point, the power of community.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a pretty good handle on the general application process. But I'm curious, is there anything different about applying for an MBA compared to other master's programs?
That's a great question. And it brings us to something really important. While the basics are the same, applying for an MBA often comes with its own set of expectations.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and focus on the MBA. We've got some excerpts from a guide called MBA in the USA, Your Ultimate Guide to Pursuing a Prestigious Degree. What does it say about the application process?
Well, right away, it says that work experience is really important. Most MBA programs want you to have at least 2 to 5 years of experience under your belt. They're looking for people who've already been out there in the real world facing real business challenges.
So it's not really a program for recent graduates then?
Not usually. They want to see that you've already developed some skills, some leadership qualities, and problem-solving abilities. It's about adding that extra layer of experience to the group.
That makes sense. So the GMAT is even more important for MBAs than I'm guessing.
Absolutely. The GMAT is designed to test those skills that you need to succeed in business school. Things like analytical thinking, problem-solving, data interpretation, all essential for navigating the business world.
And what about the SOP for an MBA? What kind of story should applicants be telling?
It's all about your career path, your leadership experiences, and your vision for the future. Why do you want an MBA? How will it help you reach your goals? What unique perspective do you bring?
So connecting the dots between your past, present, and future in the business world.
Exactly. And don't underestimate those LORs. For MBAs, it's really helpful to have recommendations from supervisors who can talk about your leadership potential and the impact you've had in your previous roles.
Okay, so the MBA application process has its own unique quirks. But let's be honest, one of the biggest hurdles for a lot of people is the cost. We've already talked about tuition fees, but are MBAs even more expensive?
I hate to say it, but yes. The guide mentions that tuition for top MBA programs can range from $50,000 to $80,000 per year. And then you've got living expenses on top of that, which can be even higher in cities where those big business schools are.
So we're talking potentially over $100,000 for a 2-year program.
Yeah.
That's a huge financial commitment.
It is. And that's why it's so important to look at all your options for financial aid. The guide talks about some really competitive scholarships like the Fulbright Foreign Student Program, the Stanford Reliance Durapie Fellowship, and a bunch of scholarships offered by Harvard Business School.
And don't a lot of universities also offer merit-based or need-based scholarships specifically for MBA students?
They do. It's competitive for sure, but if you do your research and apply early, it is possible to get financial assistance.
So it's not impossible, just challenging.
Exactly. And remember, an MBA is an investment in your future. It's about gaining those skills and connections that can really boost your career.
Okay, so we've covered the MBA application process, which sounds pretty intense, but also potentially very rewarding. Now let's zoom out a bit and talk about some of the challenges that international students might face during their master's journey, regardless of the program.
This is something that's really important to think about. Studying abroad is an amazing experience, but it definitely comes with its own set of hurdles.
Right. We've got some insights here from LetzStudy, that company we mentioned earlier that specializes in helping students navigate studying in the U.S. They've identified 6 common challenges that students, especially MBA students, might run into.
6. Okay, let's break those down. What's the first one?
No surprise here, high tuition fees. We've already talked about how expensive it can be, but LetzStudy really emphasizes that this is a major obstacle for a lot of people. They suggest looking into scholarships, assistantships, and even student loans to try and ease that burden.
Yeah, that's in line with what we've been talking about, being proactive with financial aid and exploring all the options. What's the second challenge?
The tough admissions process, especially for those top-tier programs. Getting into a school like Harvard or Stanford is super competitive. LetzStudy recommends building a strong profile with a good GMAT score, relevant work experience, and a compelling SOP that really showcases your strengths and what motivates you.
Yeah, you've got to prove that you're not just academically capable, but also a good fit for the program and their culture.
Yep.
What's next on the list?
Visa rejections. This is something that a lot of international students are really worried about. You go through the whole application process, you get accepted, and then you hit a roadblock at the visa stage. It can be really disheartening.
Absolutely. LetzStudy recommends working with an expert to make sure your visa application is as strong as possible. They have a team that specializes in helping students navigate the visa process.
Good to know. Having someone who knows the ins and outs of visa regulations can make all the difference. What's the fourth challenge?
Cultural adjustment. Moving to a new country, adapting to a new lifestyle, and navigating a new academic environment can be a lot to handle.
It's a big change, both practically and emotionally.
Right. LetzStudies suggest connecting with student clubs, attending orientation sessions, and even joining Indian student groups to help ease that transition.
Having that support system of people who are going through the same thing can be so valuable. What about the fifth challenge?
Job market uncertainty. Even with a U.S. degree, getting a job after graduation, especially for international students, can be tough. The job market can be unpredictable, and the competition is fierce.
So how do you deal with that?
LetzStudies stresses the importance of networking, going to job fairs, and doing internships during your program. Those experiences can really boost your resume and give you a better chance of landing a job after you graduate.
Building connections and getting some real-world experience makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the last challenge they mentioned?
Homesickness. Being away from your family and friends for 2 years can be really hard. It's natural to miss them and to want to be back in familiar surroundings.
Yeah, that's the emotional side of studying abroad that people don't always talk about.
Right. LetzStudies recommends staying connected through video calls, getting involved in social events, and finding ways to create a sense of community in your new environment. Those connections can help a lot with homesickness.
So while getting a master's in the U.S. comes with its fair share of challenges, with the right support and preparation, you can definitely overcome them. But, listening to all this, I can't help but wonder.
What's on your mind?
Well, we've talked about all the challenges, but what about the success stories? What about the students who went through all this, faced those hurdles, and came out on top? I think hearing those stories would be really inspiring.
You're right. And you know what? We actually have some of those stories to share right after this.
You're going to do the after the break thing again, aren't you?
Nope. Remember, we don't have breaks. We're just going to dive right in.
All right, so we've really dug into the details of applying for a U.S. Master's, and it's a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely a journey.
But honestly, I need a little inspiration right now. We've talked about all the challenges, the costs, the whole application process. I need to hear some good news.
I get it. It's easy to get bogged down in all the logistics and forget why we're even talking about this. A U.S. Master's is a huge opportunity. It's a chance to chase your dreams, learn incredible skills, and build a global career.
That's exactly it. So tell me about those success stories. You mentioned that LetzStudies has some examples of students who not only made it through this process, but actually thrived.
Oh, they've got some incredible stories on their website. One that really stood out to me was Rohan Sharma's story.
Okay.
So imagine feeling totally overwhelmed by the application process, not even knowing where to begin.
I don't have to imagine that's how I feel right now.
Right. Well, Rohan reached out to LetzStudies for help, and they helped him break down the whole process into smaller steps. They helped him figure out which universities were a good fit for him. They helped him polish his SOP. They even connected him with alumni for informational interviews.
And what happened?
He got accepted into Arizona State University with a really good financial aid package.
Wow, that's amazing. It just goes to show that with the right support and strategy, even the most daunting process can be manageable. What other stories did you find?
There's Priyaneer's story. She was struggling with her IELTS scores and writing a strong SOP. She felt like she was falling behind.
I can relate to that feeling.
But LetzStudies gave her one-on-one coaching for the IELTS and helped her write in a SOP that really highlighted her experiences and what she wanted to achieve.
Did it pay off?
She ended up getting a 7.5 on the IELTS and getting into the University of Texas at Dallas for their data science program, which is really competitive. It shows what you can do with hard work and the right guidance.
I love those stories. Okay, give me one more. One that really shows how people overcome these obstacles.
All right, how about Arjun Patel? He was super anxious about the visa application process. He was convinced he was going to get rejected.
I bet that's a common fear.
It is. But LetzStudies helped him get all his documents together. They helped him prepare for his visa interview, and most importantly, they helped him build his confidence.
So did he get his visa?
He aced his interview, and now he's studying mechanical engineering at Northwestern University. It's proof that even the scariest parts of this process can be overcome with preparation and the right support.
Those stories are so encouraging. It's like, yeah, it's tough, but it's definitely possible. It's about finding the right resources, having a good plan, and believing in yourself.
You got it. And never forget that you're not alone in this. There are so many people out there going through the same thing and celebrating each other's successes.
We've talked a lot about the application process and the student experience, but we haven't really touched on the bigger picture, the value of having a U.S. Master's in the long run.
That's a good point. It's easy to get lost in the details and lose sight of the long-term benefits. Luckily, we've got this great article called Masters in the USA, Everything You Need to Know to Start Your Journey, and it talks all about that.
Perfect. So let's talk about those long-term benefits. What does the article highlight?
Well, it reiterates what we talked about earlier. A U.S. master's degree can really boost your career prospects. It makes you a much stronger candidate in the global job market and opens doors to opportunities you might not have had before.
So it's not just about the 2 years you spend studying. It's about the impact it has on your entire career.
That's right. It's an investment in yourself, your future earnings, and your ability to make a real difference in your field. And the article actually cites studies that show people with U.S. master's degrees earn significantly more on average than people with just a bachelor's degree.
Okay, so there's a definite financial benefit.
Yeah.
But beyond that, what other long-term advantages does the article mention?
It talks about the skills you develop during your master's work: critical thinking, problem solving, research, communication, leadership. These are all super valuable in today's job market. It also emphasizes the importance of the connections you make, meeting classmates from all over the world, professors who are experts in their fields, and industry professionals through internships and research.
It's like a 2-year crash course for your brain and your professional network.
I like that. And remember, these benefits go beyond just your career. The article talks about the personal growth that comes with studying abroad, the cultural immersion, the chance to broaden your perspective and challenge your own assumptions.
So it's a transformation on multiple levels, both professional and personal.
Exactly. And it's something that stays with you long after you graduate.
You know, this conversation has been so helpful, but it's been kind of a whirlwind. We've talked about the challenges, the costs, the whole application process.
But we've also talked about the rewards, the
Yeah.
incredible education, the career opportunities, the personal growth, the chance to be part of a global community.
It's like anything else worth doing.
Oh.
It takes work, dedication, and a little bit of courage,
Yeah.
but the payoff can be huge.
Well said. So, to everyone listening, if you're thinking about a master's in the USA, don't let the challenges scare you off. Do your research, explore your options, and reach out for help if you need it.
Exactly. You don't have to do this alone. There are resources, support systems, and experts available every step of the way.
We hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights. And remember, investing in your education is an investment in your future.
That's a wrap for today's deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want to explore anything further.
We're here to help you on this journey.